All right, welcome back. Today I'm talking about coaching elite level powerlifters. I've been fortunate enough to work with a lot of very high level powerlifters over the years. I mean, just recently we had Colton Engelbrecht go the #1 male dots in reps of all time. We've got Danny Grigsby joining the team, or he's joined the team. We've got Dylan Hellriegel, Joseph Whitaker. We've got Kurt Keogh. Jen Smith, Lilley Riley, all these amazing elite level lifters. And that's just the current roster, not to mention all the lifters I've had in the past as well. And over the years, I've learned quite a lot with coaching the elite. And it's always interesting to hear people's opinions of what coaching the elite looks like when they haven't worked with the elites. And a lot of the times it just comes from what people parrot. If you hear the same thing over and over enough, you just start to believe it and you stop questioning it. Let me give you an example of this. That's a little bit left of field, but whatever. People say deadlift is the most fatiguing lift. I believe where this sentiment comes from is like a really old EMG study, like really old, where they were sort of looking at lower back strain or lower back recovery. And obviously the lower back, the spinal erectors, are a very small muscle group and they get fatigued and they take a while to recover. So they're like, well, because deadlifts are very heavy on the lower back, deadlifts are the most fatiguing lift. That's not controlling for technique. What is that even comparing to? Anyone who's a real lifter, anyone who's a coach, will gladly tell you that squats are more fatiguing than deadlifts, but it's something that still people say. Deadlifts are the most fatiguing lifts. Most people don't actually believe it when you question them. Do you believe it? Anyway, a really common statement that people hold when it comes to elite level lifters is, or elite level sports people in any sport, they could just do anything and they'd get stronger. You know, this person, the coach of the elite level lifter, they're not even doing that much. The elite level lifter could do whatever they want and still get stronger. I actually find kind of the opposite has been the truth. That's not the case at all. And so that leads us to sort of point number one, which is when working with elite level lifters, precision matters. What I mean by that is we're walking this fine balance between creating enough fatigue in a training block, generating enough stimulus to continue to make strength adaptations along the way, but balancing that with the fatigue generated by virtue of the fact that this person is really, really strong. And so we want to push. Training needs to be hard, but because this person is so strong, just the fact that they're lifting more weight generates more fatigue. And so we're walking this fine balance, not only because of that, but obviously the increase in load, even relative to the person's strength, has inherent risk when it comes to injury. So we want to be careful because things going wrong under a really big weight can be different to things going wrong under a much lesser weight. Precision matters. So working in understanding a fixed block length by which you understand what the lifter can tolerate within that fixed block length is really important. And I don't actually think that's too crazy of a suggestion. I mean, like, you look at a contrasting programming philosophy to my own. I work with fixed numbers. I work with fixed block lengths. I work with proactive deloading. Look at like RTS and Mike T, look at emerging strategies. When he's working with elite level lifters, they're finding a fixed block structure to work within so it's predictable and repeatable. That is so much more important, or so heavily important with an elite level lifter, such that we can do enough work to make progress. We're not holding back so much that we're limiting the progress, but we're also not pushing so hard that we're increasing the injury risk. So the precision in training is really important. And that kind of blends into my next point, which is about mapping training out over a longer time horizon. When you're working with newer lifters, novice, intermediate lifters, you can kind of go, oh yeah, let's do this comp, let's do that comp, and just work it out as you go along. Because strength progress takes so much longer, the more experienced that you are, you can express your strength more. You have to work harder to continue to make those adaptations. There's less requirement for ongoing skill development because you already have it. And so it just becomes work. The time that you have to put towards training becomes more critical. You need a return on your investment in training. And when you break training up into fixed block lengths and then map that out over a year, you don't have that much time. So most coaches will work in something like a 4 to 6 week block length with a deload. So for example, most of the time, in fact, almost all of the time, I'm working with a 5-week structure, 4 weeks on, 1 week deload. If I'm working with a 5-week structure and I map that out over 12 months, that's only 10 training blocks, with 2 weeks of holiday time, whatever downtime, getting sickness, 2 weeks of annual leave in there. A year of training is only 10 blocks. If you have 2 peaks, 2 hard peaks, remember in a peak, you do not get bigger, you do not get stronger. Peaking is a waste of time towards getting stronger. It's necessary to perform, of course. So it's not a waste of time in that aspect. But in the grand scheme of getting bigger and better and stronger, 2 peaks, straight away, you lose 2 blocks. You lose 20% of your training year. Now, if you're silly and you're like, we're going to do 4 peaks, you lose almost 50% of your training year. That's crazy. Imagine not training for half the year and expecting to get stronger. So when we're working with elite level lifters, even the ones that compete more often, it's really important to monitor and to measure what time we have and be really wise about how hard we peak and when we peak. A great example of this I'm going to use is Lilley Riley. If you follow Lilley Riley, well, if you don't, you should be, because she's incredible. If you follow Lilley Riley, you'll notice she competes a lot. She does every second comp. Now, Lilley's in a position as a lifter such that she can walk into most comps and do really well. And so she does a lot of comps because it affords her the ability to travel around. She's a social butterfly. She likes interacting with her fans and with her people. She likes traveling for competitions. She also likes winning, and she also likes winning prize money. All totally fair points. If you look at her history in the last 12 months, let's extrapolate it out over like 18 months maybe, she's done something like 10 competitions. Now, has she peaked 10 times? Absolutely not, because if she had peaked 10 times in the last 18 months, she would have spent only a few months actually training. And so knowing that Lilley likes to compete relatively often, we have to be really careful about what we choose to peak hard for to ensure that she's continuing to make progress. Look at a lot of the high intermediate, low elite lifters that get stuck in the trap of doing the same numbers at every meet. This is the big difference of identifying the shift between novice, intermediate, advanced, or elite. The intermediate to advanced transformation looks like the intermediate person tends to compete more often. And when their numbers really stop shifting, they're getting to the point that they're becoming advanced and they need to peak less often. And you see it a lot where people don't recognize that and just stay at the same numbers for years. Well, they identify as strong. Maybe they're winning competitions. And so they've not only identified as strong, but they're getting the feedback from the community that they are strong. They're winning competitions. People are praising them. They're getting a social media presence. Look at their open powerlifting record. It's like bench 205, bench 207, bench 202, bench 210, bench 207. The same numbers over and over and over. I'm not picking on anyone particular there, by the way. I'm just making up a number. Don't get any ideas. But have a look at someone's open powerlifting that's doing the same numbers over and over and over. You'll notice that they're probably competing quite often. And in that time between competitions, there's not actually a lot of time of training to build momentum, to make adaptations, strength adaptations, and to get better. That becomes really important with the elite level lifter. And I just want to pick apart another great example, and I want to give him a shout out because he's not talked about enough, but he will be, especially in the next 3 to 5 years. Kurt Keogh. So Kurt started with me with around a 900 total, and in a couple of years we've taken him to over 1,000. And Kurt competes like once a year, maybe twice, but the second one is never that hard. But he just works nonstop. He's a workhorse. He's training hard year round, and he's just adding 50 kilos, 50 kilos, 50 kilos. So sitting at 1,000 kilo total, 3 years of hard work, not competing, not peaking too often, peaking when it matters, we're going to see that just increase. And 1,000 to 1,050, 1,050 to 1,100, all of a sudden he's one of the best lifters in the world. That's going to be crazy. And this is by design. We're not peaking very often because we know it detracts from making him stronger over time. So mapping out training over a year is super, super, super important with the elite. The genetically elite don't just magically get better. So this is the thing that everyone says, oh, they don't have to try very hard. They just get stronger. That coach isn't actually doing anything. They're just consulting with them. They're just, talking to them and guiding them and making sure they don't do dumb shit. That's just not true. That's just not true at all. In fact, I'd argue the opposite. Because things have to be precise, because things have to be mapped out, it's actually much easier for things to go wrong, for people to get injured, for people to go backwards when they are more and more genetically elite. You get this interesting psychology that comes with it as well, especially in today's day and age with social media, because someone who started from a very low point and worked their way up over years and years and had to work hard and see the hard work come to fruition has a better appreciation for what it actually takes. So you see a lot of people who start off really strong, who get a bit stronger, who end up near the top, that then fizzle out really quickly, either because they don't actually know what they're doing, they get past the point of those noob gains, they get the praise, they get the identity as a strong person, but they don't really have any lived experience or knowledge of what it takes to get stronger. They fall off, they disappear, or they get injured, or something happens. And I don't want to call people out because I don't know everyone's stories. But if you want to get a real life example of this, again, I don't know this guy from a bar of soap. I don't know his personal story. I don't know why he left lifting or anything like that. But Dr. Deadlift, Kayla Willam, blasted up out of nowhere, massive deadlift, was breaking records. Everyone was looking at him. Where is he now? Like a healthier long-term improvement arc where there's hard work, where there's a gained experience, a gained knowledge over time, leads to a more consistent, predictable approach that breeds longevity. And again, I'm not calling out Kayla Willam. I'm just saying from the outside looking in, isn't it strange to see these lifters that appear out of nowhere, that are massive and then disappear very quickly and share that same story? Rapid rise to the top, same numbers at every comp for a while, disappear or get injured. And so with the genetically elite, there needs to be a little bit more care into nurturing and understanding of training principles, of going back to basics. This is especially the case with novice freaks. So what I mean by that is most people have a relatively average starting point. Like most people after 6 months or a year of deadlifting, the average male around 90 to 110 kilos, deadlifting somewhere in the 200s. If you've got a freak that's deadlifting 400, they're still very much novice. It's just we get so bamboozled by the fact that they've got these massive numbers. And the average person is going to be a little bit scared of that. And as a coach, you have to ignore that, go back to the bare basics, the principles, and apply good training principles over time. Someone who's new, what do they need? They need lots of volume. They need lots of rep work. They need to build a foundation of muscle. They need skill development. They need to be doing the work. They can't be doing hyper-specific stuff. They need a broad range of exercises to develop a base, to be working on any weaknesses in the main lifts that are potentially holding them back. Because again, there's a leak in the system. If there's a major breakdown in an area of technique, and instead of lifting 200 kilos, the person's lifting 400 kilos, that becomes a real concern. Like that becomes not just a bottleneck, but an area that could be a career-ending injury, potentially, under that sort of weight. And so, if you pay attention to some of the lifters that I coach, I'll bring up Colton again. Colton's a young guy. He's 23 years old, or just about to turn 24. He's got the all-time male dots at 23 years old. He totaled above 1,100. He's squatting and deadlifting in the 400s, benching in the mid-200s. We're doing 3 sets max a week on squat, bench, deadlift. And we're doing a shit ton of accessories, building weak points in his system, building a base, building some muscle, growing, developing, getting skill development so that he doesn't just fizzle out, so that he doesn't become the best for a year and then disappear. This guy is going to be a lifelong powerlifting champion if he wants to be. And my job as a coach is to ensure that I don't let ego get in the way, that I don't push him to just do freaky numbers all the time, but I actually build a base that's going to serve him well so that he can have the long powerlifting career that he deserves and that he's earned. And so it's not a case of coaching the genetically elite is easier. In fact, it's much, much, much more difficult, which is why they come to people like myself or Mike T or Bryce Krawcheck or, these coaches that have been around for over a decade and developed a lifelong learning of how training works for strength in powerlifting. Sometimes, my next point, when it comes to working with the elite lifter, you have to control the athletic mindset. What I mean by the athletic mindset is people who are typically performing at a high level in sport have a switch in their head that other people don't have. Most people, when their body is saying, you know what, I don't like this very much, their brain will go, hey, you should probably stop. And they stop. People with the athletic mindset, that switch either doesn't exist or it is so dim that they don't listen to it. So when their body's saying, you can't do any more, their brain's saying, you have to do more if you're going to be the best. And learning how to dial that or, play with those levers, knowing when to lean into that and lean away from that is really important. Because people who are freakishly strong like to test their strength. And testing their strength rarely brings anything good with it. And so knowing how to control that with the lifters that have it is going to be really important. And some people have it without, being genetically elite and the best of the best. But one of the most common questions I get asked is like, what kind of mindset does Jen Smith have, or Lilley Riley, or Colton, or Kurt, or whatever? And to be honest, I know for a fact, because I can see it whether they admit it or not, they have that thing inside them that's like, I'm going to do this. Like there's no telling them no. And it's funny to see how different people's personalities will come through to try and mask that within it. And I know what it looks like, so I can see it whether they try and hide it or not. But they have that switch. The genetically elite tend to have that switch. I shouldn't even say the genetically elite. The top of the sport, the people that are the top of the sport and stay the top of the sport tend to have that switch. Being genetically elite helps them get there because there are genetically elite people that probably don't have that and probably don't last for very long. The final point that I have is that there's no room for complacency. So this sort of touches back on that point of like, oh, they can just do whatever they want and get stronger. No. There's no room for complacency. There's no room for self-doubt when it comes to your understanding of technique and programming as a coach. So like when I get Danny Grigsby approach me recently and say, let's kick off this coaching journey. And he has the biggest powerlifting deadlift ever in the world. Like most people would be too afraid to touch that. I'm not, because my goal is the same as his. He's not coming to me to give me praise for the work that he's done. He's coming to me to find out how the fuck we can make the best deadlift in the world untouchable. How can we make the best better? That's my job. My job is not to get clout for me. My job is to make the best better. My job with Colton is to not just get the all-time record total, but to push it so far out of reach that no one can touch it. Like the best in the world, they're not looking for a pat on the back. They're looking to be better than the best. They're looking to be the best plus, and that's my job. And so there's no room for complacency. There's no room to be like, yeah, it's working, it's good enough. Yeah, you're the best in the world, therefore we don't have to do anything different. That's the whole point I'm here, to do stuff different or differently enough to continue to produce results and to continue to get better. I think that's a pretty good overall summary of what I'm trying to say here, which is shout out to anyone who's working with powerlifters as coaches, and shout out to anyone who's working with people that are much stronger than themselves and helping those strong people get stronger, because it's the opposite of what people think. It's harder than coaching the average person, not easier. It takes a lot more thought, a lot more confidence, a lot more precision, and I want people to know that. And I want people to appreciate that. I want lifters to understand that, but I also want coaches to have confidence to trust themselves and their ability to get people stronger so that when they work with these people, they can get a result out of them too. Hope that helped.